Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome everyone to another episode of Recover You. Welcome Patrick.
Welcome, Kylene.
Thank you.
And in this room, we also have two other living creatures.
Coco and BB.
Coco and BB. Yeah.
Well, today I'm going to give an update on the Facebook, Recover You Facebook page really quickly. But before we do that, I want to let everybody that lives locally, so somewhere in the Dayton, Ohio area, or within driving distance of the Dayton, Ohio area, we want to invite you to a really special event that we are hosting in May and June. So this is we're very excited to do this. And there's really two people that we're audiences or two people that we're sort of really thinking that this is for. One is anyone that is a leader of some sort or an influencer of some sort in your church community. And so that is like a pastor, an elder, a Sunday school teacher, someone that is involved in some sort of thing at church. But the other more broad is, do you go to a church? Yeah. And you simply want to learn how to bring recovery resources into your church, and you want more education and awareness around this topic, and you want more support around introducing it to your church, and maybe you can be the liaison. Maybe you can be the person that begins to talk to the pastors, talk to the elders. This is also open to any denomination. So Catholic, Protestant, we have a little bit of interest from the LDS community. So anyone that is in a spiritual community that is interested in bringing recovery tools to their spiritual community, this is for you. So what is it? We are hosting a 4-day, they're all separate days, so don't worry, it's not like a 4-day course or anything like that, like in a row that you have to take a whole weekend for. It's 4 Saturdays, 2 in May, 2 in June, where we are going to utilize Pure Desire's Sexual Integrity 101 materials, and we're going to go through them together. And the reason we wanted to do this is, one, so you get access to the materials, and we can all sort of do it together. But then two, we want to make sure that there's enough time and connection for questions, and also separating them as opposed to doing like a 2-day conference day weekend where it's like back to back to back to back and exhausting. We really wanted to spread it out so that we all have time to sit with it, to think about it. If you're coming and you're someone that's really involved in your church, and maybe you're in a position where people come and ask you these questions, when we're going through the materials, we want enough time for it to really settle and for you to think, okay, how do I apply this in my church? Or have enough time to think about questions to bring to the next session so that we can support you more fully. So what we're doing is we're hosting it 4 different weekends: May 3rd, May 17th, June 7th, and June 21st. So those are all Saturdays. Don't worry, we are not stealing an entire Saturday. It'll be 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., so 4 hours. Each session, we're going to watch 2 of the Sexual Integrity 101 videos together, and then we're going to have plenty of time and space for questions, for discussion, for application, and we're also going to have snacks and coffee. So
snacks and coffee.
Come for that if for nothing else. But the goal is really to empower, encourage, and equip you to facilitate safe, effective conversations about sexual integrity in your spiritual community. We want to help you and your church create lasting change and implement some of these recovery tools. We want to help you and your church understand the core issues and pitfalls surrounding this topic. We may or may not have mentioned this on the podcast before, but about 10% of churches, or maybe even less than that, have programs that support those struggling with pornography or inappropriate sexual behaviors, but about 54% of active Christians admit to viewing pornography. So it's a higher problem than there is support for in the church. And so what we're trying to do here in our local community is connect with people that are connected to the church, that are connected to the spiritual community in the surrounding area. And we want to spread awareness, and we also want to really empower you with the tools that you can easily bring into, if you're somebody that's like, hey, how do I run a group, or how do I talk to my pastor, or let me learn just a little bit about this and maybe I can recommend it to my pastor, or, maybe you can come and say, I want to, head this ministry in my church, and we can help you with, sexual integrity is going to give you all of the basic information of like the problem and how the church, currently handles it, but what could be improved. We're going to talk about what happens in the brain with addiction. We're going to talk about the reality of trauma for the betrayed partner, all these things. So it really is like an educational 101 around the topic. But then we also want to make sure that you're fully equipped. If this is something that you want to bring to your community, that you have all the tools, all the resources, all the information you need to get this started. So we're going to put a link for registration in the show notes. So if you're interested at all, click the link, answer some of those questions, let us know. You don't have to be able to attend every single date if you are interested, but we have an option there for you to check which ones. The specific location of where we're meeting is going to be determined once we have sort of a final head count. So that's it's probably going to be mid to end of April, because that will announce that, because we're going to run the first one, like I said, May 3rd. So if you're interested at all, please reach out to us, fill out that form. Right now, I'm not thinking that we're going to have a live streaming option. We would love to have as many people as possible participating. But for this first time, I'm not sure. Sometimes with materials, they're a little, because we're going to be streaming some of the materials online. Right. So sometimes that's a little bit, I don't know if we have permission to do that as, a Zoom or a live stream or whatever. But anyway, if you are somebody that is connected to a church and you think that these materials could be helpful in your church, this information could be helpful, you have a passion to help people, maybe you are a couple or an individual in recovery and you're like, what are my next steps here? Please come. If you are in the local area, we would absolutely love to have you. Reach out if you have any questions at all. We would love to answer them for you and to give you more information. And if you are hearing this and you're like, this would be great for my church, we are happy to connect to your church. If you want to do an email intro, we're happy to come over and speak one-on-one and in person with people, answer questions, whatever it is that you need to help get this rolling in your church. We're here to support you. So Sexual Integrity 101, starting May 3rd, 4 separate Saturdays. It'll be a good time. We'll be able to connect, learn more about you, your ministries, and answer all of your questions as well. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. It's a great program. It's really well done.
Yeah. The second thing I wanted to quickly do is just give you a little update about the Facebook Recover You page. I'm sad and disappointed to say that we still do not have access. I really miss connecting with you guys, the people that, the betrayed partners that have been in that community. It's been really interesting, the little progression of time. I was like, man, I kind of maybe didn't realize it was a connection point for me to talk to all of you directly, to answer your questions, to feel connected to you, to offer that support directly to you. And I really miss that. And I'm sad that we don't have that. I am giving it a little bit more time. The person that reported the infringement has retracted it. They received an email from Facebook that kind of implied that it should be resolved, but it's not, because I still don't have access. So I don't know if there's a little bit of a delay, if it's Facebook makes it incredibly difficult. You can't really reach out to customer service. You can't get direct human contact. You can't get a lot of feedback. So it's been a little bit of a frustrating process. So I think where I'm at right now is that I will give it a little bit more time to get resolved naturally. And if that doesn't happen, it will be very unfortunate, but I will maybe set up a new group and we'll start over. So I just kind of wanted to let all of you know that. So thank you for everyone that has, participated in that group previously, and for all your patience through this process. All right. Ready, Patrick?
I'm ready.
We're going to get into today's topic. Yep. 3 tips that are helpful in theory, but not in practice. Dun, dun, dun.
Try harder.
Oh, we should add that one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start with, this is something that I talk to maybe trade partners about a lot. Actually, this comes up a lot. And that is the idea of the piece of advice is, you cannot and you should not control your partner. Yeah. Okay, cool. It sounds like good advice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you really can't. You can't control anybody. But there are, to just allow people to go on hurting you is
yeah. So I think I end up having these conversations because a lot of the betrayed partners that I work with are incredibly empathetic people. And let's start with the advice is well-meaning. Okay. So the advice that you shouldn't be a controlling person is true. Being someone who always needs to be in control of everything is not a healthy place to be, right? However, this type of advice becomes misunderstood to the point where it actually can become harmful in relationships after betrayal. And this is kind of what I see where people are like, well, I can't do this, I can't do that because it's controlling. And it's actually a misunderstanding of what control is and what their role as a spouse is after betrayal. And it can get interpreted as, for example, I can't control my husband or his recovery, so I'm not really allowed to set expectations for his behaviors, which means all I can do is focus on my own healing. And I really don't have a say, or maybe I don't even have an influence in what he chooses to do or not do. And so if we think about it from that perspective, I think that can be very dangerous because tell me your perspective, Patrick. One of the things I think about is right after discovery, like an addict really isn't fully capable of handling everything himself. Like he needs that,
right,
that outside influence, that outside push, the boundaries, the expectation, the clarity.
Well, there's a lot of things that can kind of, and I think about my own process, but there's a lot of things that kind of shove you into the process of starting to break down what you've done, break down the denial structures, break down the impact of what you've done. And so, those can be things like you're sleeping in another room, right? And so, that's an important step because it creates an opportunity for both parties to think, for both parties to have separation. Another one was, all the restrictions that were put on my computer life. I guess you could argue between iPhones and personal computers and things like that. And you're right, because I've spent the last, decades going, I'll figure it out, right? I'll figure it out on my own. Mm-hmm. Well, you haven't figured it out. You haven't figured it out on your own. And this even goes to well-intentioned. I was well-intentioned.
Yeah.
But I hadn't been able to figure it out. So I needed that help. And you're not thinking clearly. You don't know exactly what's needed. You had more of a clarity of thought in you. And then over time, we did review those restrictions, right, and so kind of, and then reset those boundaries or whatever and said, hey, well, does this still make sense to do it? Yes, no, talk it through and then go from there.
Well, I think how this idea can really go wrong is so for the addict, like we sort of just talked about, they don't always have the wherewithal to handle their own recovery up front. Mm-hmm. Because, in your case is such a great example. You wanted to, you tried to multiple times, you couldn't do it. It needed to come into the light and you needed the external accountability and kind of push to actually get it done. So this isn't saying anything negative about addicts. It's just a reality of their brain being hijacked by the pattern and the chemicals. And I think something that's very important for betrayed spouses to understand and for the addicts themselves to understand is they haven't just lied to you, they've lied to themselves. Mm-hmm. So somebody that's wrapped up so much in their own self-manipulation and deceit and confusion isn't going to have the clarity to, often they're not going to have the clarity to kind of handle all of this themselves and jump into recovery without some level of expectation, boundaries, consequences, coming from life coming from the spouse, whatever, right? So it's just it's better for them to have the support. So that shouldn't be interpreted as somebody being controlling. It's actually a really kind thing to do, to say, hey, I'm going to help you here, but I'm going to be a little pushy about it.
Well, and Ted Roberts says that you've lost the ability to make good choices because of the way the brain has now been shaped because of the addiction. And so you have to be detoxed. And, how do you detox somebody? You put them in a hospital or you do whatever. And all of these tips are along those lines. It's like you have to get detoxed.
Yeah. The other thing from the perspective of the betrayed partner is that it kind of takes the autonomy away from the betrayed and wounded person. So it can leave that person feeling powerless. Like if I can't set expectations for his behaviors, then I just have two choices. I can either leave or I can sit here and suffer. And that's, I don't believe those are your only two options. Like you can really set clear expectations. And then like you said, over time, and this is something I talk about with my clients as well, is like a lot of this effort that I'm mentioning, a lot of this participation, a lot of this stuff that's sort of that setup comes within the first month or so. Then it really truly is, okay, they're starting to get stabilized. You've done your job helping them do that, getting connected to the right resources, setting the boundaries, etc. Then you sit back and watch, because then it really is their job to handle it beyond that point. But the stability aspect of it, you're absolutely not being a controlling partner by saying you have to get into this recovery program. You have to connect with a therapist. We can't sleep in the same room right now, whatever those boundaries are for you.
Well, and one of the other things that I think has been very effective, for us is access into all of my social media, and things like that. So the notion,
and that's a really good example, because I do think a lot of people may view that as being controlling, and it's not. It's not.
And so, like I was, I think about this often. It's like, well, there's nothing that you're going to find, in my case anymore, right? There's nothing you're going to find. There's nothing that's in there. So just knowing that you may go in there at some point is in some cases reassuring, because it started off like, man, I hope you don't find anything because I don't know what the heck I'm doing or whatever, right? To like, hey, you're going to go in there and you won't find anything because I've just learned how to live into this. I've healed into this lifestyle now.
Yeah. So when you think about, okay, this is confusing and we're trying to figure this out and I don't want to be a controlling person, what can betrayed partners do? So one, you can take control to an extent. So just a reminder that you cannot actually control your partner. It's physically impossible. They will ultimately do what they want to do. So try your best not to stress about that concept in general. You cannot control another human being. They will ultimately make their own decisions. But what you can do is show them the map of recovery and explain clearly what it is that you need. And if they want recovery, then they will participate in that lead and participate in the healing process. And then that's, they will actually, like, to your point, Patrick, what you were just saying, like, appreciate the accountability, especially in those beginning phases. And if they don't, then all you've done is speed up the process by gathering information that you would have found out eventually.
That's right. Yeah.
So the second thing that is really that a betrayed partner can do is get really, and I mean very clear on your boundaries, what it is that you will and will not tolerate in order to remain in a relationship with this person. So sometimes people might say, but I thought boundaries are just about you and not the other person. So this is another area where it can get a little confusing. And so I'm going to clarify that as well. They absolutely are about you, but safety for you means that your partner isn't acting out and betraying you all the time. So it is actually a boundary for you. And it can absolutely be that your partner gets into recovery. That can be a boundary for you. So you would just say, hey, in order to remain in this relationship, this is one of the things I need to see happen. And it needs to happen within this period of time. Here are the resources. I expect you to participate in them. Again, you're free to do what you want, but I need you to know that for me and my safety and my participation in this relationship, this is what I need.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. There's, the reaction of the betrayed partner can differ very much from, you relapse and we're done, to I don't really want to know. But always think about what you're trying to do in the relationship and what that addict needs. So if you don't really, I'm just going to go out on a crazy limb here. But if you say, well, I don't really care if they relapse, right? Let's say that's your, I hope that's not your mindset, but let's say it is. Even saying, I don't care if you relapse, but I need you to tell me in 24 hours if you did, it lends a level of accountability. It lends a level of process to it. And process is what helps people heal. Once again, I hope that's not your mindset. We want to get people to the point where
we want them to
they're healed, right? And sometimes relapse is a part of people's healing journey.
Yeah, I think, and that is a boundary that some spouses set, is that, hey, I want you to, whatever happens, I need to know, because it's the lying that's the worst part for me, right? And so that's what that's their perspective is, hey, I need to know. And as long as you tell me, like, that's going to be helpful. And then I would say, if that is one of your boundaries, which is totally fine, it's a very good boundary to have, make sure you follow that up with a question to yourself of, okay, what if they take that then? And now I'm all of a sudden getting confessions once or twice or 3 times a week, and this goes on for the next 3 years. Am I going to be okay with that? Just because they're coming to me and being honest to me, and that's what I asked them to do, because sometimes a partner can go, well, that's what I asked them to do. Now I'm stuck, right? Mm-hmm. So just follow it through to the end result of, if this continues, right, am I still going to be okay with it long term? Right, so that might be a really good short term boundary. Hey, while you're getting stable, while you're getting into recovery. But the long term boundary and expectation is the freedom, is the recovery.
Thought of something right as you said that. I was like, you are allowed to change your boundaries.
Yeah.
You are allowed, because, we don't plop into this world having full knowledge of everything that happens.
Right. So, and we don't, and as a betrayed partner, you're in such shock and trauma brain too.
Right. Yeah.
You're trying to figure things out. You figure things out as you get education. 6 months down the road, your mindset's going to be different than day 2.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you may talk to a couple that went through that process of, let me know if you relapse, and that person never relapsed. And you're like, okay, I'm good. But then your particular partner relapses all the time. And you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with that now? And so, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. It's okay to say, hey, we're going to adjust this now. Yeah. I really appreciate you being honest with me, but I need you to take that next step into healing.
Absolutely. So I will say, the don't be controlling advice, I think, can really keep people stuck, because people that are controlling, they're not going to listen to that, and they're just going to be like, whatever, I'm going to be who I want to be, right? And so so typically that advice to people that absorb it are the people that don't need to absorb it. They're the people that, I'll say this, just like if you're someone that goes, am I a narcissist? You're not. Because narcissists don't ask that question. Generally, the same thing is going to apply if you are a betrayed partner going, am I being too controlling? If you are asking that question, you are you're very unlikely to be a controlling partner if you're thinking about it and you're aware. Right. So if you have asked yourself that question and you're really worried about it, it's probably not you. So take a breath.
One of the things too is, and there are a lot of things that you put in place for your safety that very much had to do with my addiction. And then there were some things that didn't have anything to do with my addiction. But we went through it and we worked with those things. And then at such point when it was appropriate, it's very important to say that it wasn't day 3, it wasn't whatever, I did approach you and say, hey, can we talk about this particular boundary? And I believe I was kind on it. I hope I was kind on it, but we were able to reset. And so, the being able to have those discussions as a couple and allowing the betrayed partner to feel safe again, or to voice, well, this is why I have this in place. And then the addict can say, well, that was never part of, whatever. These are really good discussions to have as a couple. Yeah. They're really vulnerable and open and honest discussions, and it actually does drive some healing. So, that's just a recommendation to both sides. If you put a boundary in place and you're the addict, I would tell you, hey, get up on your horse, comply with the boundaries, even though you may not think that they comply or that they're applicable. Mm-hmm. And then at such point, when you can have a good, normal conversation in a healed manner, broach that, but also broach it from a standpoint of, hey, my ears are wide open on this. Yeah. I'm not coming in saying this is the way it's going to be, because that's going to make, no matter what the thing is, that's not going to go well. Yeah. So,
well, I think it's just, what you're saying. It just comes from that mentality of like, you did a really, really bad thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you've hurt someone very deeply. Life is going to be hard for a little while.
It is.
And you kind of, to an extent, need to accept that in order, if you ever want to move through that and have a connection with your partner again, creating that safety is going to be uncomfortable for you a little while, because all this life that you've been living is going to change. And it doesn't really matter if change is good or bad or whatever. It's always uncomfortable. Change is always uncomfortable, even when it leads you towards the best part of your life.
Right.
Always.
Right.
So you did something really, really bad. There's going to be a lot of change. Change is very uncomfortable. So things are going to get really uncomfortable. Like but it's going to be okay. I promise. It's going to be okay.
Yep.
So let's flip it maybe I of the three pieces of advice that we're talking about today, I think talking about this one's going to take a little bit longer than the other two, but flip it a little bit and go, when can control actually be an issue? So I want to just reiterate, if you're a partner that's asking yourself this question, you're probably okay. You're probably okay. So, and I also want to just sort of wrap up that first part by saying, like, boundaries are not being controlling. Okay. You are not being a controlling partner by saying, this is what I need to feel safe in my relationship, in my life, or to stay in a relationship with you. That is not being a controlling spouse. You are allowed to say that. And it is totally fine if those boundaries apply to their recovery. That's fine. That's not being controlling. It's just saying, I don't feel safe if you're constantly betraying me. That's right. Okay. You're allowed to say that. So when can control really be an issue? So this is kind of when I would say maybe like micromanagement comes in, right? So when you are, like I just said, like when you're refusing to tolerate like mistreatment or infidelity, like that's not being controlling. But if, let's say you have somebody that is like doing, like they're checking every box, they're really doing the work. But then you have to micromanage every aspect of their recovery, or maybe they're working really, really hard, but you just cannot say anything nice about what they're doing. That may be transitioning a little bit into, okay, I have to be in control of everything. I have to control my partner, and I'm never going to say anything nice about what they're doing. I have to just control recovery. Like I'm in I'm checking everything. I'm pushing everything. I'm hyperanalyzing everything. Like that might be a little bit too far into that aspect. Now, I do want to make this little caveat here. Control can be a protective trauma response. Mm-hmm. So you may not naturally, like historically, be a controlling person, and you might find that tendency is coming up here in recovery. So I would say, like, if it's a tendency you've had for a long time, it might be worth talking to someone, to a practitioner, to a coach, to a therapist, to somebody that understands this world, to help you navigate that, and to help you move into a deeper place of, as long as safety is established in your relationship, move into a deeper place of healing yourself, to really kind of say, okay, is safety here? Should I be able to trust my partner? And if I'm still micromanaging, then like, is this a problem? Is this a wound that maybe I need to work on? And that's where a little bit of that internal personal reflection can come in some of that healing work. But it can be a trauma response. So if this is, like, again, I like to sort of clarify where you are in recovery. If you feel like you're micromanaging things and you're 3 months in, you're probably not micromanaging. You're probably just overwhelmed with setting everything up, and your brain is in hypervigilant trauma mode. So that is different than being a controlling person.
Right. Yeah, that hypervigilant mode is not a mode that people can stay in for a long time. And it's just, people who do stay in hypervigilant mode, they end up having some health consequences and things like that. It's just not something that you can do, but it's very normal.
It's something that people can stay in a long time, but shouldn't, because it's
good point. But it is as if you're managing his candy consumption, if you're managing his, like his workouts or whatever, I mean, it while normal and expected and understood, it is one of those things that at some point you have to reflect and tie it back to the addictive behavior and say, is this applicable?
Right. Yeah. So I think it's, I think it's important to know that the hypervigilancy and some variation of control can be a trauma response, to be really gentle on yourself in the first several months of recovery, to know that setting up boundaries, setting up expectations, getting them into recovery, connecting them to the resources, none of that, means that you are a controlling person. But if this is something that has stuck around for a long time, you find yourself micromanaging, you find yourself constantly hypervigilant, it may be worth working with someone to help begin, okay, I have some unhealthy patterns, or I have some consistent trauma responses that are not going away with safety and with time. And then you can work on, okay, have we set up appropriate boundaries? Let's heal any vulnerable, wounded parts that are still sticking around, any triggers that are still really surface level here that are hurting me and hurting our relationship, so that I don't have to continue throwing out like the defense mechanism of control, which is really what that is. It's just a form of defense. And so that I think is an awareness of like, okay, if there is control, it's because you don't feel safe being vulnerable yet. And so if you don't feel safe being vulnerable, then it's time to say, if enough time has passed, then it's like, okay, is there safety in the relationship? Is there safety in recovery? Is this something that the two of us can work on together to feel more connected so that I can feel safe being vulnerable? And, then we can begin, or is this something that I need to work on personally to begin healing some wounds? So all of those are just things to consider. But I do hope that some of you listening can take a little bit of a breath here and go, oh, okay, that doesn't fall into the controlling mode. I'm really okay. Like I'm responding like a normal traumatized.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like it's really okay. It's really okay. Yeah. Anything else about that?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. All right. So the second tip that is helpful in theory, but maybe not in practice, is this concept of marriage is hard. So I want to counter that with marriage is hard versus life being hard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this might seem a little weird talking about this in terms of like betrayal recovery and addiction recovery, because some of you might be going, what are you talking about? After betrayal, marriage is really hard. Let's take betrayal and addiction out of it for a minute and just talk about the concept in life, in society, that you might hear this phrase, right? Oh, marriage is so hard. The reason I think that, let's talk about why people say this, because what our point with these are that all of these tips and all of these phrases are said by people who are well-meaning, but then they're interpreted in ways that keep us really stuck and in shame or in guilt or in unhealthy mindsets even that keep us from living healthy lives. So when people say marriage is hard, a lot of times what they mean is, hey, like, don't expect that marriage is going to solve all your problems and that, you guys are going to have to navigate some hard things together and, all these kinds of things. I mean, true, right? Like, yeah, we can agree with that. But how it gets interpreted a lot is by, again, it's by a lot of these people that are very, very, very empathetic people and who always want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, and maybe have a difficulty with boundaries. And so then that phrase, marriage is hard, can get interpreted as, well, I was told that marriage is hard. So that means that this pain that I'm going through is normal. That means that our incompatibility is normal. That means that this abuse that I am undergoing verbally, emotionally, physically, whatever it might be, that's just a normal pattern because everybody told me that marriage is hard and this is just a hard that I have to deal with. And we want to tell you that it's not. Mm-hmm. And so I would say the reason I would change this to life is hard is because when you have a partner that you guys connect with, and I always like, one of the things that I say is, and you hear me talk about this about Patrick, but then, when I see people that are, successful in relationships as well, I think they like each other as human beings and they get along as friends and as humans. If you have those things as the foundation of your relationship, you just genuinely like the other person and you complement each other in a lot of ways, then you can navigate so many hard things in life because life is hard. There will be things like addiction. There will be things like betrayal. There will be things like stress. There will be things, parenting, illness, all of these different things. Absolutely. And that part is so true. Life gets hard. But when you are with somebody that, is a good match for you and you guys are helping each other grow and you like each other as human beings, that I think saying marriage is hard can really keep people stuck in unhealthy patterns way longer than if we promoted actually that the baseline of a relationship should kind of be easy.
What comes to mind as you're talking about this is, you get hurt in a relationship and you get healed in a relationship. And so, that's a very broad statement, means a lot of things, but, sometimes people will be like, well, if you love each other, anything can happen, or anything, good things will just happen. And it's like, well, yes, marriage has hard moments to it. It doesn't mean that one of those hard moments has to be constant, repetitive, and unrepentant abuse.
Right.
That's not the marriage is hard. There's illness. There's, parents who are too involved. There's,
and by the way, you mentioned unrepentant. Real repentance equals changed behavior.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm just let's repeat that for everybody listening. Real repentance means changed behavior.
Right. Right.
So it's another thing I think people get really tripped up on is, well, they are apologizing, they're crying when they're telling me this, but then next week it's the same thing all over again.
Right. Well, it's just interesting because when you get into like if couples come in, the individual part of a coupleship comes into a relationship, marriage, and they bring their families of origin in there. They bring all of their wounds and they react to those kinds of things. They have the opportunity to grow together through those. And love is a big part of that. But, vulnerability and openness and friendship and all of those things are part of it. And so, that process has been hard. Our last 4 years has not been easy. It just has not been easy at all. But we've kept going because of the base level of what we think about each other, what we believe in, and how we ultimately want to achieve, or how we want our relationship to look. So, had you just, taken that approach and been like, well, marriage is hard, it is what it is, and never taken the steps that you took towards me to get me in there, or vice versa, if I had never been like, well, what's the classic, my old lady's really on me because
ball and chain.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the ball and chain thing. It's that. Like, well, I think there's a once again, you get wounded in relationship and you heal in relationship, and actually it can be the same relationship. Mm-hmm. You can have both of those things happen if people are committed.
Do you feel comfortable? I don't want to say comparing, but do you feel comfortable if we just sort of briefly give examples of we've both been married previously and how those maybe didn't bring out our best selves, and then even going through this, we showed up very differently as human beings.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go into any detail with that. Just maybe what I just said is enough. I know when I was married previously, I did not show up as my best self, and it was not a healthy relationship in really any aspect. Should not have gotten in that relationship. Leaving it was a great, wonderful decision. What's that tattoo? No regrets.
No regrets.
No regrets.
Yeah, no regrets.
No regrets. Anyway, no regrets there. But the difference, and this is, I guess, what I'm trying to share with this concept is we complement each other in so many different layers and so many different ways that even though this really horrible, traumatic thing happened, we were able to move through it because we were able to sort of still interact that way, even though we had all this pain, all this grief, all these things that we're still, navigating through this process, right? So I think sometimes if you look at my first relationship and you go, well, marriage is hard. Okay, well, I guess this extreme level of toxicity and unhealth and lack of compatibility and we did not bring out the best in each other. I guess I just have to suffer through that. Or, you have a relationship that really does base itself on friendship and connection and communication. And okay, now we're moving. Now we can navigate life, the hard things in life together, because you help me when I'm not feeling good, and I can help you when you're not feeling good. And I really like you and you really like me. And that's so totally different, that life is hard versus marriage has to be hard.
Yeah. I would say in my previous relationship, to the way I look at it now, it's two very wounded people.
That's a good way to look at it.
And
I could say that for me too.
And we didn't communicate about our wounding. We didn't know, and that's part of it is you just don't, we don't see examples around us where that happens.
But to be fair, you and I got together wounded as well, and we interacted differently.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so, sometimes it's these types of situations that, and I never want to minimize any pain, but present the blessing of forcing you to get into a process that allows you to start healing. I think we've said this before. The addict's behavior is about their wounds that they've experienced through life, and they're trying to medicate those wounds. The reaction of the betrayed partner, a lot of times, is not just based solely on the betrayal. There's a lot of multiple reactions that come out of that because their view of themselves in light of their previous wounds and the betrayal.
Right.
And so it allows you to get into a process where you can start to really clear those things and process those things out. And so, as painful as this is and as hard as this is, once again, back to marriage being hard, right? It actually...
Does being married made hard, Patrick?
What's that?
I said being married to me hard.
No. But it allows us to start in a process that we would have otherwise probably never gone through.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, that's a blessing, because then you can show up for each other in a much more positive way. You can show up for your kids in a much more positive way. Because the hard is not going to keep coming. It's going to keep coming. And the
hard is not going to keep coming. It's going to keep coming.
The hard is going to keep coming. Right? The hard will not keep coming.
Stop. What is happening? The hard won't stop.
Yeah, the hard won't stop. So, but
life won't stop.
Yeah, let's say you and your partner end up being fine. Well, your kids are going to go through relational issues. Your kids are going to go through heartbreak, and your kids are going to go through disappointment. And how do you show up for them? Do you show up as a safe parent, safe friend, at whatever age that is, or do you show up with your wounded pattern and continue to wound them? Well,
I think what you're really highlighting is this idea that the recovery opportunity really offers an opportunity to show up differently in life. And it doesn't just stop at the relational healing. It helps you interact with the world differently. And that's why it's so good, and why I think actually the tools that we use as recovery from this stuff are actually tools that apply to anybody. Like, you don't have to be listening to this episode to benefit from recovery work.
Right.
You don't have to be wildly addicted to pornography to go into a pornography recovery group and become a better person, and to learn how to deal with some of the emotional wounds that have hurt you in your life, and to learn how to communicate with more empathy to your partner. You don't have to be like the edge of the spectrum one way or another to find benefit from these healing modalities. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Okay, the last thing, this one might be kind of short, but the last tip that is helpful in theory but not in practice is when people will make the comment, okay, you guys are getting married. Now, once you're married, you should never talk about divorce. Divorce is not on the table. It's not something you should ever consider. Once you're married, it's not an option.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Well, you'll see this a lot in faith-based communities, that divorce is not something you should ever say out loud. I think I even heard one time, I don't know if it was a pastor, like somebody say the concept of basically talking about divorce or saying divorce is going to or threatening divorce or whatever, puts a crack in your relationship.
It's kind of like if I threaten you that I'm going to watch football on Saturday, then it's going to come to pass.
So again, the the well-intentioned perspective here is, hey, like we want marriages to thrive, right? And so maybe if you want a marriage to thrive, you shouldn't always have one foot out the door and be like looking at other options and, all this kind of stuff. Okay, now we can agree on that. We want to focus on fidelity. We want to focus on connection. We want to focus on vulnerability, moving towards each other to improve the relationship. Yes. But again, one of the ways, this is why I think wording is so important and the way we communicate and the long-term, understanding the long-term messaging impact of stuff is so important. Because some people might interpret it as, okay, well, divorce is off the table, which means I have to focus on you. But a lot of people interpret it the same way as marriage is hard, which is like, okay, divorce is not an option, which means I am required to stay in a relationship that is unhealthy for me and I don't have another option. It's absolute misery. And where I think the opposite is actually totally beneficial. Two people getting into a relationship should know at any moment that the other person is free to leave. Just because you're married does not mean that you lose autonomy for your life and for your choices and for your body. I actually very much think that when you know that divorce will always be on the table, it puts this extra level of pressure on each other to an extent to say, okay, well, if I can leave any day, if you can leave any day, maybe I should put effort into this so that, maybe I should focus on this. Maybe I should work on this because I know this is not you being here tomorrow is not a guaranteed outcome.
Yeah. There's a lot of theology wrapped up in this, and I will not for 1 minute begin to, put myself off as some sort of expert on that. But I would have a tendency to agree with you that there is a real beauty to saying, I want to do things that every day allow my wife to choose me. And so if how do you, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you're like, I'm 1 foot out the door or whatever. It just means that you're continuing to prioritize your wife. I actually, I listened to that Carl Lenz podcast on Lights On. Thank you. Lights On. And he actually said something that when he went through, because he has he was unfaithful to his wife. And he actually said it this way. It was really, really, really good. He said that for so many years, his wife was the last priority. So we'd call her at the end of the day. So he said, since he's been through his healing process and through therapy and recovery and all these things, he always talks to her first thing in the morning because he wants to make sure that his wife gets all the attention, the best of him when he's not tired, and he wants to make sure that she gets that first. And that's really beautiful because it's kind of what, she had the option to leave him. He knew that and she didn't. So he wants to say, hey, I want to, what was last is now going to be first. And so, that's if sometimes if you just, let the theology stuff go for a second, don't get so wrapped up in that other than to say, what conditions do I have to create on a daily basis that allows my spouse to willingly pick me, willingly and lovingly,
and vice versa
me.
For you to pick them.
Right. Yeah. What has to happen? And so,
because to that point, like that goes back into the boundaries for the betrayed partner. Like for me to stay here, like I need these things to happen. That's very important to communicate. But then over time for the betrayed partner too, to begin pouring back into like, I see what you're doing. I love you. I appreciate you. I respect you as a human being. I think you're an amazing person. Like, being able to have that bi-directionally at some point after a lot of the healing has occurred. And so then it is I'm choosing every day to be here. And that's a really, really, really important mindset for a betrayed partner to have, because a lot of times, what I will hear from the pain and through the healing parts that are so uncomfortable for so long for the betrayed partner is, just it makes it so much worse when you feel stuck. So much worse. So think about reframing things in a way where you always have choice. Every single day of your life, you have choice. And there may be a variety of reasons that you're choosing to currently stay, but just reminding yourself that it's a choice.
Right.
And then when you have this mindset, I can leave any day, my partner can leave any day, it's going to instigate that sense of choice. I get to choose to stay, and I get to choose to be with my partner.
Right.
And vice versa. They get to choose to stay or leave, and they're choosing me.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else on that?
No.
I think that concept of divorce never being an option is like really can make people feel very, very stuck, very overwhelmed.
It almost could be used, I don't want to go down too far of a deep rabbit hole here, but whoever's saying it to you, you would always question, okay, why is that person saying, is it because they're ashamed that they never left when they should have? Is it a particular person that is hurting their spouse and is in a leadership position and is parroting that? You know what I mean? Like, and once
that's
again,
a good point. Yeah.
I don't want to be too conspiratorial, but think about it. Like, people who really, really love you, do they tell you to stay in a relationship where you're being abused and hurt and things like that? I think they may encourage you to say, hey, well, see if this helps, or, what condition would exist for you to be okay? Like, that's okay, right?
Safety should always be priority number one. Always.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't want to rush and things like that unless you're really, really in danger. But, it's...
Yeah, usually in this podcast, we're not talking about like explicit abuse situations.
That's right. Yeah.
We're talking about people who are in the painful phases of trying to recover, people that are trying to do the right thing, people that are going through the healing journey.
Yeah.
We always like to clarify that periodically because they are different paths. They are different messages for sure.
Yeah. I know my previous relationship, I didn't feel like I could leave it. And then she asked for a divorce, and there were some extenuating circumstances there that I'm not going to go into. But I think that came out of just my own kind of evangelical upbringing. That, it's like, no, you can't leave.
Really? You think that?
Really? Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. Well, and also too, she was, she had a medical condition that I felt like it was now my job to take care of that. And so therefore I was trapped. And I remember feeling trapped.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about reframing some of these ideas is think about how does the outcome of this belief make you feel? And if it makes you feel trapped, if it makes you feel stuck, maybe it's not a healthy belief. If we can reframe it, that into freedom, into choice, into the future, I think, the concept, the truth shall set you free, right? So if we're thinking about something in a way that really makes you feel stuck and in bondage in some way, then maybe it's not the right mentality. Maybe we should reframe that in a way. And it could, again, like we showed you with these three, it can be the same exact concept, but if you think about it slightly differently, all of a sudden there's freedom associated to it. Right. And that is important because I think that's where healing really comes in. Well, thank you so much for listening. We hope that this was helpful. Please check the show notes if you are interested in attending Sexual Integrity 101 over the summer. We would love, love, love to answer your questions, to connect with you. Reach out if you have any questions. Fill out the registration form if you are interested. We do need to get a final head count in the next few weeks. So if you can take a look at those dates, let us know which ones you're available to come to and your level of interest, who you are. And then make sure to, if you do fill out the registration form, check your email, check your spam, so that if we reach out to you, we can let you know where the location is, that sort of thing, we have the ability to connect with you there. Please remember that every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we'll see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.